All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything College Football Podcast. Here we're going to be looking at the 2021 Big Ten title game. Michigan and Iowa will be facing off in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on Fox. The over-under is set at 44. 10.5-point line in favor of the Wolverines. That's probably going to move upwards in favor of Michigan as the week progresses. They lead the all-time series 42-15. And there's also 4 ties. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. Looking at the Michigan offense, this run game is fresh off a phenomenal effort against Ohio State. 297 rushing yards. Hassan Haskins, 160+. 5 touchdowns, the most any player has ever scored in this series against the Buckeyes. I think that's the most touchdowns a player's ever had in history against the Buckeyes for any team. So props to them. This offensive line. Coming into this game, I felt like they had a tough matchup against the Buckeyes' defensive line and their run defense. But I like the offensive line they have for the Wolverines. These guys are phenomenal. Starts with Andrew Vastardis at center. Right tackle, Andrew Stuber. Trevor Keegan at guard. Those are some of the notables on this offensive line that should win the Joe Moore Award for the nation's best unit. These guys are great. Not just in running the ball, but pass protection as well. They're great. I think this offense has some really good balance. Cade McNamara, we're used to seeing this passing attack just completely stonewalled throughout the years. This year it's been a completely different story. Name the opponent, doesn't matter. MSU, they had a great game last week against Ohio State, against Wisconsin as well. Cade McNamara, he occasionally hits some very good deep balls. He's accurate in the short to intermediate range. I like this passing game. I like the overall balance they have. It's kind of a by-committee at receiver. They don't have great size. Johnson and Eric All. I think Roman Wilson as well. They're all above 6'3". So those guys are the only ones that really have some size outside of Wilson. But it's a by-committee, really. Anthony will get involved some. Mike and him as well. Multiple different guys, really, for them at pass catcher. Cornelius Johnson, though, and Eric All are the go-tos. I like this downfield passing attack for the style of offense they have. They don't even need play action for it to be effective either. You've noticed multiple times they'll line up in shotgun, drop back, and they'll have guys they can put it on. So very nice balance for Michigan. Starts up front with that offensive line, then Haskins and Blake Corum. You see Donovan Edwards occasionally get involved. Same with J.J. McCarthy. They'll bring him in there to run. He's very good at doing that, but he's got an arm too. He's thrown some very good passes this year. In the Michigan State game, I believe he threw a beautiful touchdown to Anthony. So they got multiple different looks they can throw at you. Jim Harbaugh's really having some fun this year. And when Michigan's having fun, I feel like they're a really dangerous team, especially in offense. Looking at the Hawkeye offense, it's kind of a change of pace compared to the Wolverines. Going to kind of bash them here for a minute. Regardless of quarterback, they don't complete a high percentage at all, 12th in the conference in that category. The offensive line has really struggled. Despite having Tyler Linderbaum, the rest of the unit has not been very good. They have ran the ball pretty well the last 2 weeks, but for the most part, they're not very good at creating lanes. They're, pretty solidly undersized as well. Pass protection's been a big issue. They rank towards the bottom of college football in sacks and tackles for loss allowed. I don't know if I just mentioned creating holes. That's another thing that's really been an issue. Sealing off the edge. They're just not very good at doing it. Tyler Goodson's a very good back, but he's not had a lot of help up front. He just had a big game against Nebraska. He got a very difficult matchup, though, in the Big Ten title game here in this one. They've only had one 200-yard game this year. That was against Kent State early in the year, and that was just a couple yards over the mark. So the running game, that's their bread and butter. This old-school style of offense, I think it might be coming to an end with Brian Ferentz as the play caller because it's just not effective at all, regardless of who the quarterback is, Spencer Petras or Alex Padilla. They can't get much going. Charlie Jones, he's probably their best playmaker. Selma Laporta, he's a go-to third down weapon. He can pick you up a nice 10 to 12 yards per catch. Keegan Johnson's been a big play guy. Nico Regini as well. So they got some options they can lean on. Nothing too extraordinary, though, in terms of talent at the skilled positions, other than Goodson being a very underrated back. All in all, though, they're towards the bottom of college football in multiple offensive categories. Scoring points has been very difficult. It seems like they're very lifeless. If they get in third down and long especially, You really cannot even count. You couldn't even bet your life on these guys to convert or to even get across midfield. It's just a very sluggish offensive unit for Iowa. It's a miracle they're here. Their defense has been phenomenal. We'll get to them later. But first, we'll look at the Michigan defense. These guys are, fresh off a nice game that complemented that running attack very well. Coming into the Ohio State game, I said I felt like they were going to be up to the challenge of slowing down the Buckeyes' offense, and they did it to a T, really. This elite pass rush of Ajabo and Aiden Hutchinson. These guys are phenomenal. 24 total sacks combined. That's outstanding numbers coming off the edge. If you watch the tape, they were just bullying two great linemen for Ohio State. All five of them really had difficulties against the Wolverines' pass rush. They have some nice size on the interior. Mozzie Smith, Chris Hinton, Donovan Jeter. This defensive line is really good. Josh Ross, he's an extraordinary big part of this defense, especially as a run stopper. Secondary has really grown under Mike McDonald. They kept everything right in front of them. They did a good job of taking away C.J. Stroud's top two weapons. His number one pass catcher, though, did work. The coverage wasn't bad, though. They had some really good coverage throughout the game. Tight coverage, just a better play. Better plays were made by Smith and Ajigba. I like the secondary. They do not allow a lot of big plays. They're top 10 in college football in the FBS completion rate allowed. Vincent Gray, DJ Turner, probably their best two corners. I like how they've performed in man coverage. A more zone-heavy style of offense this year has really benefited them. The nickel package they've come out with is also very well with Daxton Hill. Gives him an opportunity. They'll be a versatile playmaker for them. That's what he does. The run defense has been a little sluggish at times. Against Kenneth Walker, they couldn't tackle. The penetration, though, has been really good, I'd say, with the size they have. They're not dominant in the trenches. I think they did a very good job against Ohio State. The Buckeyes really put themselves in a lot of holes, though. A lot of penalties where they were not really able to run the ball like they wanted to. A handful of solid runs for Travion Henderson in that game. Against Nebraska, some of that misdirection was also kind of confusing for them. So they haven't been elite against the run this year. I think they've been overall pretty good, but they do struggle at times. The Hawkeye defense that's carried them here, they lead the FBS in interceptions with 22. They've only allowed 13 touchdowns in comparison. This cover two shell has been phenomenal. They've been giving up a good amount of yardage totals over the past couple of weeks here down the stretch, but they make up for it with that playmaking. Riley Moss, Matt Hankins. They got a hybrid playmaker in Dane Belton that can do a lot for them. A veteranized secondary, Jack Corner at safety. These guys are phenomenal making plays, making other teams force teams to make mistakes. They were very good in the back end. They've been a little sluggish here. Against Purdue, they got absolutely torched. Moss was out. Matt Hankins didn't play very good either. So they're not invincible, clearly. I'd say they got a pretty favorable matchup here in this game, though, especially with how they defend the run. 2.9 yards per carry, that's top 10 in college football. Zach Van Volkenberg off the edge. I expected him to have a big year coming into the season. He has done that. Double-figure tackles for loss. Hasn't been as exceptional as a pass rusher, though, as anticipated. Lucas Van Ness, the freshman, he's really struggled. He's really stepped up in that category, 6 sacks. The pass rush as a whole, it's kind of struggled. They don't really get home all that often. Middle of the pack in sacks. Joe Evans, he's another one of those guys who's an asset. So they got players that are plenty capable. They're a phenomenal linebacker. Jack Campbell, 122 tackles this season. He's been terrific. Seth Benson, Jensen Jacobs. They have very good linebackers. I like what they have in the middle of their defense. They all complement each other very well. They're all good, very good playmakers in coverage, too. I'd say they're all pretty moderate in that area. But again, the front seven, they're great at stopping the run. I don't know what the highest total they've given up this year is, but it's not a lot. Penn State is the only team I think that had more than 3.5 yards per carry. I know they're the only team that had more than 4 yards per carry in a game against them. It probably could have been a lot worse in that game. But for the most part, they've been very dominant against the run. That Purdue game is the only bad one they really had against the pass. They played absolutely terrible as a football team against Wisconsin, mainly on offense. So that kind of set them up for failure in that one. But you haven't seen this defense down and out at all, really, this season, other than the Boilermakers game. Overall, these guys can hang on defense. Looking at team comparisons, it's a clean sweep across the board almost for the Wolverines. I just talked about how much I like that Iowa linebacking core. So I'm going to give them the edge there in their secondary, kind of by default. I mean, you lead the nation in interceptions. Opponents don't really complete that high of a percentage. Of course, Michigan, they just had a dominant performance. Not dominant, but they had a very good performance against Ohio State. They didn't give up any big plays in that game. Ohio State really had to earn it. They had to go up and down the field. They couldn't do it in a hurry. So Michigan, their secondary is not no slouch whatsoever, but it would be disrespectful not to give the Hawkeyes the edge here, as they've really earned it throughout the season. Everywhere else, though, Michigan has the edge. There's really not much to talk about. Iowa's really struggled on the offensive line. They don't have many trusty wide receivers or weapons outside of Sam Laporta. And the running game's one of the conference's, probably the conference's worst, one of the nation's worst. So clean sweep really for Michigan. Final thoughts on this game, keys to it. Michigan, I think field position is going to be big. Tempo as well, kind of try to keep that defense off balance. Josh Gaddis, I think he should kind of do what Mike Yurcich did in that Penn State game. Early in that first half, Penn State really had them on their heels. Sean Clifford, he got injured, went out, and that's all she wrote for that game. Iowa was able to take advantage of that, but they spreaded them out. They used tempo. They were able to work the middle of the field. They were able to run it very well, Clifford with his legs. They're really exposing the Iowa defense in that game. I think Michigan, they have the potential to do the same thing. For the Hawkeyes, winning the turnover margin, that's what their football team's built on. So obviously that's going to be a big key. You got to find some sort of passing game, something like I don't really know what to say. They have not had anything at all. One of the worst downfield passing games in all of college football. They got to stay out of third and longs too, or this edge duo is going to tee off. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. Iowa's going to struggle all game long. I have Michigan winning 24-10. Pretty basic score for a Big Ten title game, but I just think that Michigan's going to control the field position. I don't think they have any issues running the ball despite the tough matchup. And they don't have to be great passing the football. I don't expect them to, but just don't make mistakes. Your defense will flip the field or force turnovers in their own right, and I think that's what's going to happen here in this game. It should be a pretty easy victory for Michigan, even though if they turn the ball over, Iowa will probably have a very good shot of winning the game because that's what their entire football team is built around. But I don't see their offense doing much, especially with this defense, the mojo they got going after the Buckeyes game. These guys are ready to battle, and a win here locks them into the playoffs. So I think Michigan, they're going to take care of business in Indy. Make sure you like, subscribe, leave a comment. See you next time.